What happens to our food chain when the bees die as pollinators disappear due to the use of chemical pesticides? Kenyan farmers must pollinate their crops by hand.
COVID-19 restrictions resume in Nigeria. To prevent a third wave of infections, mass gatherings must return to 50% capacity and government meetings go back to virtual platforms. Hello and thanks for tuning into the show that goes around the continent to bring you stories near and far. I'm Chamberlain Osowa, Channels Television here in Lagos. I'm joined by Vincent Makori from Voice of America in Washington.
Thanks, I'm Vincent Makori at the Voice of America. Happy to be with you again for another edition of Africa 54. Our broadcast still looks a little different because of the global pandemic, but we truly appreciate you staying with us on Africa 54. Let's start off with the latest from Nigeria. Chamberlain Oso in Lagos brings you that story.
The federal government of Nigeria has reintroduced restrictions on mass gatherings to 50% capacity in a bid to prevent a third wave of COVID-19 infections. The Presidential Steering Committee on COVID-19 also announced that government meetings and travels have been limited to virtual platforms as part of the fourth phase of COVID-19 restrictions in the country. Our correspondent Gloria Umezuke tells us more.
Apparently worried by the resurgence of the COVID-19 pandemic in 3 countries of India, Brazil and Turkey, the Presidential Steering Committee on COVID-19 takes a further precautionary step in its domestic response by reintroducing restrictions of mass gatherings and curfew.
This phase 4 of the first restriction of movement shall come into effect. We shall maintain restrictions on mass gatherings outside work settings with a maximum number of 50 people in any enclosed space. Approved gatherings must be held with physical distancing measures and other non-pharmaceutical interventions in place until 11th of June, when the situation will be reviewed.
Although there is no limitation to inter- or intra-state travels, the committee empowers security personnel to monitor and enforce compliance to non-pharmaceutical interventions on public transport.
States have been asked to institute mobile courts to help enforce on-the-spot fines and close premises that violate these provisions.
The committee is compelled to seek alternative vaccination for Nigerians following a global shortage of vaccines, particularly from India, as African states unifies the cost of COVID-19 testing.
The authority of ECOWAS heads of state and government has fixed the cost of COVID-19 testing, whether PCR or any other form of testing, antigen testing, at $50 at all points of entry with effect from 17th May 2021. This is to ease travel and trade among citizens of ECOWAS, states traveling within the region. And it is also only restricted to travels within the ECOWAS sub-region.
As the PSC reintroduced restriction guidelines and activates curfew across the country, it resonates the need for state governments to earnestly intensify the vaccination campaign.
Let's get more on this story from a molecular biologist, Dr. Akiala Ishaku. Thank you for joining us on Africa 54. Now,
thank you for having me.
All right. Before now, compliance with COVID-19 protocols have not been at the level that the authorities want to see. What can be done to persuade people to obey these new restrictions, as it were?
Thank you for having me. I think what we need to do as a country to actually enhance compliance to COVID-19 non-pharmaceutical safety measures is to continue with robust stakeholders engagement, continuous strategic communications, and be able to marshal out strategies to actually bring back the trust that Nigerian citizens have on its government. Chamberlain, I can categorically tell you that we have lost trust on the leadership of of our country, and so we need a kind of a robust, systematic, strategic communications and engagement of stakeholders. This will be the only way. I will prescribe that we move onto setting up health corps marshal at a local level that should be able to go door to door and to be able to pass the message of COVID-19. COVID-19 is real. Except we do that, I see third wave coming up very soon.
Well, what effect would you say the COVID vaccine has had so far on containing the spread of the virus?
Yeah, it has actually helped, despite we have sporadic cases of adverse drug reaction as a result of the COVID-19 immunization program in Nigeria. But I think so far, it has actually reduced the hospitalization rate. It has also reduced community transmission. If you check the NCDC daily update on number of cases, you will discover that it has reduced dramatically. So I strongly believe that we can push ahead. The vaccination exercise has improved. Now we have a global crisis of vaccine production. And I hope you know that India, that produces over 80% of our vaccine, is also hit by the pandemic. So what we just need to do is to look out on how to sign MOU independently with manufacturers of these vaccines so that we don't create gap, and then as such, we may run into trouble.
Well, that presents its own unique challenges, but there's talk that the Indian variant might already be in the country. What more can be done in this case to curb the spread of this variant in the country?
3 weeks ago, Professor Happy of Redeemer University of Center for Excellence for Infectious Disease was able to characterize and sequence Indian variants in Edo State and Osun State. But the good news is that the mutation sequence of this variant that was found in Nigeria was not, it differs with that of the Indian variant, although it has a lot of over 70% similarity. The implication is that there are about 3 lineages in the Indian variant, whereas the one found in Nigeria, there is 1 lineage. What we just need to do is to intensify border surveillance, like in our airports. We need a kind of a robust border surveillance. Our airport health authority needs to be on their tools. We also need to come up with a national policy, just like the way it is done in the UK. In the UK, once you get into the country, you go into self-isolation, you take your test, despite having a PCR test from the country that you are coming. On day 2, you need to perform another PCR test, and then on day 8. But in Nigeria, we don't do that. As once you come, you just perform your test, you are good to go. So we need a kind of a robust, active surveillance on our border, and also active surveillance for people that are coming up from risk countries. That will go a long way to do that.
And molecular biologist Dr. Akiala Ishaku, thanks for joining us today on Africa 54.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome back to Africa 54. I'm Vincent McCory in Washington. Health experts worry that public skepticism about taking the relatively small number of doses African countries have battled to procure could prolong a pandemic that has already killed more than 3.3 million people worldwide. So-called vaccine hesitancy is a global phenomenon. France and the United States are struggling with it, and skepticism is on the rise in some Asian countries such as Japan. In Africa, health experts say a combination of warnings about possible rare blood clots, the rubbishing of vaccines by some leaders, and the mixed messages over expiry dates have all contributed to the slow rollout across the continent.
When Dr. Edith Serum received her coronavirus vaccine at the Nairobi hospital where she works, nurses joked she might start speaking a foreign language.
I told everybody who I was working with that I had gotten the vaccine, and of course you get these comments.
Some got the AstraZeneca shot after watching her closely for side effects. Others in the Kenyan capital are still refusing. Africa has already had to battle to secure a relatively small number of COVID-19 vaccines. Now, health experts fear so-called vaccine hesitancy is slowing rollouts across the continent. Vaccine hesitancy is a global phenomenon. France and the United States are struggling with it. Skepticism is on the rise in some Asian countries, such as Japan. In Africa, health experts say a combination of warnings about possible rare blood clots from the AstraZeneca shot, the rubbishing of vaccines by some leaders, and mixed messages over expiry dates have all contributed. The World Health Organization and Africa's CDC have repeatedly advised that the benefits of the AstraZeneca vaccine outweigh the risk. Nevertheless, the rollouts in some countries have been slow. Take Kenya as an example. The government began vaccinating 400,000 frontline health staff and other essential workers in early March, with more than 1 million AstraZeneca vaccines it had received. By April 25th, according to the Health Ministry data, only 152,700 health workers had been inoculated. Chika Ofo is the founder of the Vaccine Network for Disease Control Advocacy Group in Nigeria's capital, Abuja.
Unfortunately, immediately they started distributing the vaccines. This whole story of blood clots and all sorts of things came up concerning the vaccines. And then to make it even worse, countries like UK, Germany, and France now decided to halt, the use of the vaccines, the AstraZeneca, Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine. So that now gave us a lot of problem. That behavior in itself caused a lot of problem in Nigeria.
The continent's most populous nation, Nigeria, received nearly 4 million AstraZeneca shots on March 2nd. By April 23rd, just over 1.15 million doses had been administered. At that pace, it will take nearly a decade to vaccinate Nigeria's adult population, and until mid-August to use those doses from its first consignment. The shots will expire on July 9th, a government official said.
Over 100 photographers have visited a neighborhood in Nigeria's capital, Abuja, to create portraits for the community. Organizers say it's an initiative aimed at spreading hope amid the coronavirus pandemic.
Hadiza Dean is all smiles as her neighbors cheer at the entrance of her home in Abuja. The 80-year-old farmer stares at the portrait with joy, an emotion she says she's not felt since the loss of her farm produce last year due to storage deficiencies and transportation hurdles. Dan says the picture will help people remember her.
I am very, very happy with the picture, and I know that my grandchildren will look at the picture in future and be telling people that is their grandmother.
Her portrait was taken, printed and presented to her with a letter of hope by a budding photographer, Belumi Davis. He's one of the 100 photographers that took part in the event. The project is an initiative under the Unabashed Creativity Foundation, which its founders describe as a community of creative professionals using photography as a tool for social change.
This whole project came about from a core passion to impact the community, especially during this COVID-19 pandemic. A whole lot of families have been distressed. A lot of people have been weakened by the impacts of the COVID, businesses disturbed and all. And what we thought about is to give hope. So about 100 photographers from all around the country, we brought them together with the vision to inspire them.
Over 1,000 residents of Papi community had their portraits taken. The photographers were separated into groups for the one-day event. Each group showcased their selection, and the best of the best was awarded by a panel of judges. The organizer hopes to have the Unabashed Village opened in a few months. He says the funds it generates will be used to fund projects combining the arts and poverty alleviation.
It's time now for a short break, and as we do, we'll remind you to visit our website, channelstv.com, for news and programming around the clock. You can also find us at youtube.com/channelsweb. Still to come, showcasing villages and rural life near Cairo's famous landmarks. Touristic excursions reveal authentic food, crafts, and Egyptian ways of life. This EU-funded project also helps low-income residents build sustainable growth opportunities.
Welcome back to Africa 54. I'm Vincent Makori in Washington. Kenyan farmers say they are being forced to hand-pollinate their crops due to a decline in bee population from pesticides. Kenya's insect experts say the chemicals meant to kill desert locusts and other pests are killing off bees and other pollinating bugs. Victoria Munga reports from Nairobi.
Kenyan farmer Samuel Nderitu made a good living from his crops for nearly a decade until 2019 when he noticed neighboring farmers spraying for pests. His crop yield started dropping, says Nderitu, and is convinced it's because the pesticides killed off pollinating insects like bees. He has since been forced to hand-pollinate the plants.
It has been quite successful, not 100% though, because that is not natural. The natural way is where the insects transfer the pollen from one place to another. That's the most successful one. But now, because the pollinators are not there, we have to help in that process.
A 2019 desert locust invasion in East Africa forced Kenyan authorities and farmers into a massive spraying campaign to save their crops. But Kenya's International Center for Insect Physiology and Ecology says the unchecked use of pesticides is ironically killing off the pollinators that the crops depend on.
The pesticides are affecting the health of the bees because the pesticides reduce the immunity of the bees, now aggravating the effect of pesticides and the varroa mites, and those lack of forage because of climatic conditions and change in climate. All these, they reduce the immunity of the bees and can even eventually cause the bee death and decline in populations.
Kenya's agricultural experts are researching pest control options that reduce chemical use. Biological control using predators that feed on pests is one option.
The biggest challenge is that biological control works in situ, in ex situ. Ex situ means in the lab. It works very well. But when you take it to the field, because of rain, because of other environmental issues, sometimes it's not quite as perfect.
Biodiversity groups are also training Kenya's farmers on how to repel pests without harmful chemicals that can kill pollinators.
We train them on what we call integrated pest management. For example, if you find that you have a particular pest that is giving you trouble or a disease, how do you plant crops? For example, if you, even in your kitchen garden, if you have growing vegetables, we encourage farmers to grow them with things like onions, pepper or pilipili, and these are able to repel some of these pests.
You rub the pollen here like this.
Kenyan farmers like Nderitu hope to one day attract bees back to their farms. Until then, he will have to do the pollinators' work by his own hand. Victoria Amunga for VOA News, Nairobi.
An EU-funded project aiming to showcase villages around famous Cairo landmarks is helping its low-income residents with sustainable growth opportunities by organizing touristic excursions to discover their food, crafts, and way of life. Due to this initiative, tourists can get a glimpse of rural life near Egypt's pyramids.
Tourists visiting Egypt's famed pyramids may rarely stray from the beaten track, but a project focused on rural villages adjoining the ancient sites now encourages them to do so. The scheme takes visitors to a verdant strip of farmland thick with palm trees that runs south of the Giza pyramids between the lesser-known pyramids of Saqqara and Dashur and the western bank of the Nile. There they can get a glimpse of local communities as part of Visit Badrashin, a sustainable tourism project funded by the European Union.
I very much think that future is more about authentic experience when I mean tourism is more. I think people will more and more seek authentic experience like this, for example, than the normal big hotel and beach. this will continue, but I don't think it. I think this will be more and more asked for.
The project includes the villages of Sakara, Abuja, and Dashol, all in the district of Badrashin, and offers training to the local community in an effort to help them tap into tourism revenues and protect their livelihoods.
They trained me on how to deal with clients. We never had any tourists come to this area, so now I've become a local tour guide.
The coronavirus pandemic has reduced tourist arrivals in Egypt to a fraction of their previous levels, and the project's activities have been scaled back, but visits have continued.
When you say contrast, there's a separation. For me, it's a continuation. It goes within what Egypt is about. The past, the present, and the future. And you have places like Badrashin that represent all this.
On one recent outing, a small group of tourists were taken on a tour of the Sakara complex before being taken for a traditional fast-breaking evening meal nearby during the holy month of Ramadan. Women from the village rolled vine leaves, baked bread and grilled chicken, ending the meal with a few cups of mint-infused tea sipped around an open fire.
In Ivory Coast, girls and women increasingly are taking to the rugby field. Mama Kamara reports on how girls are tackling this rough and tumble game. VOA's Carol Gunsberg narrates.
As a girl, Daman Sanatha dreamed of playing rugby professionally, but didn't have the money or access to training. Determined that no other girls should be kept from the game, 4 years ago she began coaching Sabroko, a women's team in Bingerville. Sanatha brought the team to play at the National Institute for Youth and Sports in Marcory, a college in suburban Abuja.
I was a former player. I stayed on staff to supervise the girls. I would like the sisters to go as far as possible, ensure that there is a place for girls in this sport.
Rugby can be a rough contact sport, but 15-year-old Berta Assista, who has a different coach, is fine with that.
I started rugby thanks to my friend. She invited me to come and watch how it is played. On the second day, I put on athletic clothes to train a little. Since that day, I have loved rugby.
Isabelle Yeboah, secretary of the Ivorian Rugby Federation's Women's Commission, says it's about time women players are getting recognized.
Girls have been training with clubs for a very long time.
The Rugby Federation organizes an annual tournament among clubs. It's also a showcase to find promising players who can go on to play for the national team.
So we are doing a championship to select the good female players, let them form a team, and also participate in international competitions.
What's clear is that many girls who want to play rugby now can get the chance. Of 21 official clubs in Ivory Coast, more than half are for females. For Mama Camera in Marcory, Côte d'Ivoire, Carol Gunsberg, VOA News.
And that's our show for today. You can find all the continent's top news and world news online at voaafrica.com. Check it out. I'm Vincent McCory in Washington. Channels Television has our last word from Lagos.
We look forward to bringing you another show next week. ChannelsTV.com is your source for news and other programming. I'm Chamberlain Osor. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.